Let's just dive right in, because a massive boundary is shifting right beneath our feet in the American justice system. Today, we're unpacking a truly historic pivot in how courts are handling devastating school shootings. We're moving way beyond the era where these tragedies were pinned completely on the individual perpetrator. Now, we're stepping into the very real, very high-stakes world of parental criminal prosecution. This is a monumental change in jurisprudence. Prosecutors are literally piercing that domestic veil, completely redefining who is accountable when the absolute worst-case scenario happens.
So, ask yourself, if your child commits an unthinkable act with your firearm, do you belong behind bars? Yeah, it's a heavy, incredibly high-stakes question. And you know, for centuries of legal history, the courts gave a definitive no. Parents just weren't held criminally liable for the independent, illegal acts of their kids. But today, that's all changing. Parental negligence is actively being prosecuted. We're going to break down the exact forensic evidence, the shifting legal precedents, and the aggressive new courtroom strategies that are literally redefining criminal intent forever.
Okay, let's jump into our first section, the dawn of parental liability, moving from isolated acts to domestic safety nets.
To understand where we're going, we really have to look at the old normal, which was honestly incredibly rigid. When a shooting happened, the legal system focused almost entirely on whoever pulled the trigger. The burden of proof required direct, explicit involvement in the crime. So if a student took a weapon, the justice system viewed it strictly as an isolated, independent action. Now, sure, society would absolutely blast the parents with immense moral condemnation. I mean, pundits, neighbors, everyone would ask those agonizing questions, like how did they not see the warning signs? Or why was the weapon left out? But right there at the courthouse steps, that outrage just stopped. The parents were judged morally, yeah, but legally they were pretty much untouchable. It just didn't result in parental prison sentences because proving criminal intent for a parent who wasn't physically at the scene of the crime was almost impossible.
Next up, we have the legal threshold shift. This is a historic paradigm shift.
Right, so we definitely didn't get here overnight. But when the dam broke, wow, it broke forcefully. For decades, prosecutors hesitated to bring charges against parents simply because they didn't have a winning legal roadmap. But then 2024 hit, and it acted as the ultimate catalyst. This was the year we saw the very first landmark conviction, where a parent was tried, convicted, and sentenced to prison. And get this, not for pulling a trigger, but for providing the means and ignoring some glaring warning signs. The prosecution successfully argued that extreme recklessness basically substituted for direct intent. It completely shocked the nation. It proved to prosecutors everywhere that this strategy could actually win over a jury, and it wasn't just some one-off anomaly. That single conviction threw the floodgates wide open, turning 2024 into a launchpad for an expanding legal precedent that is still setting a brand new standard for accountability through 2025 and beyond.
When you look at the contrast between our past and our present, it is just stark. Think about it. We've moved from the heavy, but totally non-criminal burden of societal moral condemnation straight into charges of involuntary manslaughter. We are literally watching legal history unfold in real time as prosecutors fundamentally redefine where the ultimate responsibility lies. It's no longer just brushed off as a tragic oversight. It's an active criminal prosecution that carries decades of potential prison time.
Moving right along to defining criminal negligence and the mechanics of intent.
So, how does this actually play out in a courtroom? To really grasp this shift, we need to zoom in on the specific charge prosecutors are hitting parents with: involuntary manslaughter. The definition is basically the act of unintentionally causing death through criminal negligence or failure to perform a legal duty. Now, the absolute crux of this whole thing is that word unintentionally, right? No prosecutor is standing up there arguing that these parents wanted a tragedy to happen. Instead, they're zooming in on the failure to perform a legal duty. In the past, locking up your weapon was kind of seen as a best practice, a strong suggestion. Today, courts are interpreting the extreme danger of unsecured firearms around a distressed minor as a strict, undeniable legal duty. That definition right there is the bridge prosecutors are using to cross that massive gap between a terrible parenting mistake and a prosecutable felony.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of these trials because this is where the legal shift truly lives. Prosecutors aren't just relying on tragic outcomes and hindsight anymore, they are following a meticulously rigorous process. First off, they analyze the physical forensic evidence of the unsecured weapon. They want to know exactly where it was kept. Like, was the cable lock that came with the gun still wrapped in its plastic? Was the firearm just tossed in a sock drawer instead of locked in a biometric safe? Next, they comb through an insane volume of personal data to establish what the parents knew. We're talking about extracting everyday text messages, reviewing transcripts from emergency school meetings, and finding warnings from teachers that were totally ignored. They basically build this undeniable timeline showing the parent knew their child was in crisis. Then, using that specific evidence, they definitively prove the failure to secure the firearm within the context of that crisis. Finally, by compounding the unsecured weapon with that known mental distress, they establish criminal intent through gross negligence. It's a highly calculated, step-by-step process of legally transforming a failure to secure a gun into prosecutable criminal intent.
Finally, let's talk about the new risk profile and how this is altering the American household. 2024 and 2025. You know, these aren't just years on a calendar. They represent a permanent binary marker in legal history. Before these years, the U.S. legal framework essentially protected parents from the independent criminal acts of their kids. But during and after these years, the justice system permanently bifurcated. The legal landscape that protected households just 5 years ago simply does not exist anymore.
The undeniable reality of this whole evolution is that the risk profile is permanently altered for every single gun-owning household in America. Accountability now legally extends straight to the parent's duty to secure their weapons. Think about what this means for the average household. What used to be categorized under gun safety best practices, stuff you'd learn in an afternoon class or read in a manual, is now a legally enforced duty. And failing that duty, it doesn't just result in a tragic accident anymore. It carries the immense, life-altering weight of an involuntary manslaughter conviction. The domestic safety net is now actively regulated by the very real threat of prison.
So, I want to leave you pondering this final, highly provocative thought. Where exactly is the legal boundary now drawn between a tragic accident and a criminal act? As we've seen through the forensic evidence, the text messages, and those meticulous trial strategies from these landmark cases, that boundary is no longer static. It's actively shifting right beneath our feet. The precedent-setting evolution of our justice system is unfolding in real time, completely redefining where accountability truly lies.